Ruth chapter 4 is where we are at. It's interesting, it's kind of weird that we're actually at the end of the book of Ruth. We get to see the rest of the story as it is. But tonight's message is called God, the Doer of the Impossible. The Doer of the Impossible. Just kind of as an opening question, what is something that at one time seemed impossible, but now is completely possible and maybe even commonplace? Something that maybe in your lifetime, something that's absolutely impossible, but now it's like it's commonplace.
Riding around in your car on your phone.
Riding around your car on your phone, just like completely, yeah. And there's more technology in your phone than there is in the entirety of your car. Unless you have a Tesla, it's kind of even there. What else? Not now. Internet. Oh my goodness. You know, trying to think. I remember doing papers in school, and you had to go to the library, and I had to go to the card catalog, and I had to go look up whatever it was, and then I had to go look for the books, and had to read the books. Now, if you want to know anything about anything, type it in. You want to learn about Sri Lanka, you just type in Sri Lanka, and you figure out first how to spell Sri Lanka. And then you go in and do it. What about medical-wise? Medically, we've had a couple of advances, right? I had a great-grandfather that had to have cataract surgery. And he had cataract surgery, and what I remember from my mom telling me, that my great-grandfather had to basically lay down and not do anything. Anybody remember those days? You just lay in, you couldn't move. Now, how long does cataract surgery take?
I just had it.
No, like how long? Like you stopwatch, like beginning to end. How long was it?
I was in and out in 2 hours.
Yeah, it's the like a good like nice long meal with somebody, and you're done. You know, probably the check-in process probably took a good long while of it too. That was amazing. Cancer. About how we treat cancer now. How many diseases we're able to no longer worry about. Heart stents, catheterizations, bypass, replacements, all of those things.
On cars, so you know where your children are.
There you go. You got trackers on your cars now. Apple AirTags, you can figure out where everybody's at.
They put one on my car. I'm not a child anymore. They got a track on my car.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea for me either. How many of y'all have a Apple phone, and it's like you can track different people that allow you to track different people? How many of y'all have that? Allison and Grace do. I don't have an Apple. It's funny because Allison's brother's on it, so when they pull it up, it's like the globe, and you have like dots here in North Carolina and in Florida, and then there's one all the way up in Norway. Depending on where he is, he could be above the Arctic Circle. It's funny looking, but that's where we are. The impossible has become possible. Many times in life, we face impossible circumstances. The key is remembering, with God, all things are possible. Dr. Danny Aiken, the president of Southeastern Seminary, tells a wonderful story about someone that he knows. He says this: one of the finest and most wonderful people I've ever known grew up in a children's home. She was born into a home of an alcoholic dad and a mom who divorced when she was about 7 years old. After moving around from one home to another, she, along with her brother and sister, was placed in a children's home where she would live from the time she was 10 until she was 18. During those years, she never saw her mother. After 1 or 2 visits in the first month, she would not see her father again until after she was married. All this had the ingredients for sadness and tragedy, except for one thing. At about the age of 11 or 12, this confused and broken-hearted little girl gave her heart to Jesus, and Jesus gave his heart to her. God became a father to this little girl, and she suddenly became a beautiful trophy of his grace, a trophy that is more beautiful and radiant than ever. Question comes, how does Dr. Aiken know this person? The answer is simple. This girl became his wife, Charlotte. There's another woman in Scripture who's also a trophy of God's grace, and her name is Ruth. At one time, she was penniless, a young pagan widow with little or no hope for the future. Some would deem this a mission impossible for her to turn out well. But the Bible has a simple and a direct answer: not with God. In chapter 3, Ruth comes before Boaz and says, Boaz, I need you to redeem me. I would like to be your wife. Boaz accepts this invitation, and he is very, very determined to settle this as soon as possible, as we read in verse 18. And the stage is set for the ending of this story. If nothing is impossible with God, how are we to proceed, therefore, in life? What are we to do? How should we act? Chapter 4 here provides 3 lessons we can learn about God working in and through our lives. 3 lessons about God working in and through our lives, particularly through impossible circumstances. Notice number 1 is this. Many times, God uses you to answer your own petitions. Many times, God uses you to answer your own petitions. In Ruth chapter 2 and verse 12, Boaz came and he prayed, you know what, Ruth, I pray that you are well taken care of, that God would protect and provide for you, Ruth. And God is about ready to answer that prayer through Boaz himself. But it's interesting here. The way in which God chose to answer that prayer was through the very one who prayed it. And we see that Boaz really embodied a person of God, a man of God, and he had 2 really amazing aspects of his life. First, Boaz was devoted to being the right person. He was devoted to being the right person. Look what he did. Verse 1 says this, Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, Turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. I want you to notice something. Behold the Redeemer. It's very interesting here. That particular Redeemer is not named. Look all through chapter 4, not named. That's basically how he's got to be spoken of here. And it's very interesting because of the outcome. Boaz first, he goes to the gate. The gate is kind of the normal place. It's where people enter in and come out. If there's somebody special coming into the city, if somebody has got wares to sell, the gate would be where it is you want to be, because that's where you would see everybody. It's where business and legal proceedings were at. He said, behold, just suddenly out of nowhere, this other guy is there, which Boaz is smart. He knows where this guy's going to be. He knows where to come. So he says, all right, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and he sat down. Verse 2 said he took 10 men and the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. It's very interesting. 10 men constituted a quorum, a duly constituted forum to rule on a legal issue. Boaz was committed. He wanted to be the right man. He wanted to do this the right way, so he had to get the right amount of people. So he's getting ready to do business. Verses 3 and 4. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know. For there is no one besides you to redeem it. And if I come after you, and he said, I will redeem it. Now, we look at this story up to chapter 4. Where's your heart at when he says, I will redeem it? High or low? Because if he redeems it, Ruth and Boaz aren't going to get married. So as you're reading the story, is that a high point or is that a low point? Low point. Like, I don't want you to do that. One of the things we have to understand here is what's going on. That this unnamed individual had an opportunity to buy something that is important, land. He wanted to do this. We look at this idea of Naomi said had sold the piece of land when they left Moab. Elimelech had apparently sold the land use rights to someone outside of the family. Naomi has had no means to purchase it back, so she agrees to transfer that right, obligation, authority to her nearest kinsman. So the idea is the land was taken to use, but this was family land, so Naomi would have the right to buy it back. But she had no way. She had no way of doing this. But Naomi, through Boaz, is calling on the nearest kinsman to repurchase, to redeem the field from its present possessor. Leviticus 25:25 says this, if one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possessions, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. Notice that word redeem appears many times just within this chapter. Boaz says, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. Now, going through this guy's mind is probably thinking, you know what? It's not a bad deal. I get land, probably got enough money to buy it. It's a good thing. By the way, we look at land prices. Has land prices gone down at all? At any point in time in history? It's always gone up, right? It's gone up and up and up and up. So he's thinking, you know what? It's a good thing. I can buy it. I can plant more grain. I can get more food. I can sell more grain. I can make more money. It's a good deal. Until this time, he hasn't done anything. He's taken no initiative to help Naomi or Ruth. One commentator noted this. In all probability, he knows about the plot of Elimelech. So if he ignores his voluntary family responsibility, without a descendant of the line of Elimelech, the field will simply become a part of his own family inheritance. The amount that he would have to pay to redeem it, and perhaps care for the elderly widow, would be offset by the value and produce of the field. With such self-interest in mind, the nearer redeemer quickly consents to redeem the field when Boaz draws his attention to it. But notice what he says in verse 5. Then Boaz says, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Here's the twist. Here's the thing that this guy might not have done. Well, if you buy the land, you gotta go in here and you gotta take care of Ruth, because as the law said, you need to provide so that the name of the dead will continue on. The obligation to, let me give you a weird word, levirate marriage was linked to the redeemed estate. Buy the land, and you also obligate yourself to marry the girl and raise up the name of the dead husband. So this had a family obligation to it. Now, neither man is legally obligated by Deuteronomy 25 to marry Ruth. It's voluntary, but Boaz would gladly do it. But not this guy. See, there was a fear that was going on. Verse 6 talks about it. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. This unnamed guy has neither the character nor the desire to step up to the plate and rise to the occasion. He is not concerned about anyone but himself. He will not agree to redeem the field, marry Ruth, and raise an heir for Elimelech. If he does this, he must pay for the land, marry the foreigner, and see the property eventually go to maintain the name of Elimelech. And what future is in that? See, the idea was if he was to marry Ruth and they were to have a son, when he died, the son would get that property back. Elimelech's line would keep going on. So in his mind, he was saying, how is that going to help my name? How is that going to help me in the long run? He can't redeem the land and refuse to marry Ruth. There will only be shame and disgrace in that. He can, however, release his right to his kinsman redeemer to the next person, Boaz. This was the way to go. This is also the way to historical oblivion. Because Elimelech's lane will go on, but he will basically be forgotten. Here's the thing. Ruth, verses 7 and 8. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attesting to Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Boaz seized the moment there in an exchange of a sandal. The unnamed man giving it to Boaz to publicly, formally seal the deal. Now, I didn't do as much research as I needed to. Does anybody know why they would give a sandal? I got nothing. The only thing I can think of is if you got somebody else's sandal, at least, everybody's going to know it. Somebody else is walking around without another sandal. It's probably just that idea of the formality of it. Boaz keeps his word. He's the right person. His name, in turn, will become great. This anonymous person refuses to restore and perpetuate the name of the dead, but he himself also has no name. I want you to think about this. Ruth and Boaz are within the lineage of Christ. Their names are in the Old Testament, and their names are in the New Testament as who they are. And that's a crazy thing to think about. There are not many people that have that. Moses, David, Jonah, Abraham, Joseph. There's a couple of them that are Old Testament, New Testament. Ruth and Boaz were able to do this. Their names carried on. See, Boaz said, I want to be the right man. Proverbs 10 verse 7 said, the memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. Proverbs 22 and verse 1, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver or gold. Ecclesiastes 7:1, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. We have no record. We don't know who this guy was. But you know what? We absolutely know who Boaz was. Notice also, Boaz, he was dedicated to being the right man, but Boaz was dedicated to paying the price. He was dedicated to paying the price. The Levirate marriage, the Levirate, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The term is derived from the Latin word leviri, meaning brother-in-law. It's a marriage that takes place when a man dies and no male children. His brother or another relative is to marry the widow and father a son for the deceased brother. It's the practice of raising up a son for a deceased relative. There's only 3 places where this practice actually occurs. Genesis 38, Deuteronomy 25, and in Ruth. The purpose of the law is to raise a son for the dead brother. If a man dies without sons, in a sense, he dies entirely. In fact, I'm in 1 Chronicles right now, and you hear about different tribes, you hear about different cities and different areas, and you'll hear about a guy, and he said all he had was daughters. And it was like that person was just erased. So this was the idea of carrying on the idea of a lineage. When the son grew up, he would inherit the property that his father had. A brother relative could choose not to fulfill the duty. If he did refuse, he'd be encouraged to change his mind because there was shame in it. But notice, this kinsman redeemer in Boaz, he had to be 3 things. He had to be one that was going to redeem the property. The kinsman acts on behalf of the impoverished relative to purchase and return the land. He, the kinsman redeemer, he buys back that which was lost. But notice also that it's a redemption of a person. Here we see that the kinsman redeems a relative who was forced to sell himself into slavery. He buys them out of slavery to set him free. But notice also this. It's a redemption of blood. It is somebody that was within the family. Now this is one of the amazing parts. When we understand Boaz as the kinsman redeemer, we understand more about Jesus being our kinsman redeemer. Because what is he doing? He's buying us back. We were slaves of sin. Christ came, and what did he do? He came to buy us back with his blood. But not only that, he is redeeming each and every one of us. He pays a price. He pays the price for a person. But not only that, he is just like us. We know that Christ is deity, but he's deity incarnate. He is man too. That's one of the most amazing things. Ruth points us in the idea of Christ because Ruth is in the lineage of Christ. But not only that, we see a beautiful picture of Christ right here in the book of Ruth. Verses 9 and 10 says, "And then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, 'You are witness this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahalan. In Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahalan, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among the brothers, and for the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day.'" Boaz keeps his word. He's there. He willingly pays the price. He agrees to marry Ruth. He is of the lineage that is there. And then verses 11 and 12, "Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, 'We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephratah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman.'" That's a big blessing. But here's the thing. It's got some very, very interesting things. May Ruth be like Rachel and Leah. What's so special about those people? What's special about Rachel and Leah?
They're the mothers of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah. You talk about some blessing. Say, look, 12 tribes of Israel, that's where we're all from. I want her to be like that. That's a blessing. May you prosper. May you have standing. May you be famous. Any idea about Perez? That's actually that's a curveball right there, but it's there. Judah Tamar, not one of the happiest of stories. That person. So they were talking about the legacy that was there. So God used Boaz to answer this on prayer. Let me give you 3 lessons real quick. First is this: God might be preparing you to be the answer to your prayer. Therefore, listen to the word and the leading of the Holy Spirit. I thought that was an interesting thought just to kind of play around with. Sometimes we might be praying for somebody, God, I hope, I pray you help that person out. They are down and out, and Lord, they need a friend. And it's very easy. God might be saying, yeah, they need a friend. They need you as a friend. God, that person needs help, mowing their yard. God said, you got a good lawnmower in your yard. Lord, that person needs something. Lord, I pray that you would bless that person. It could be that God is looking to you to be the answer of your own prayer. That's what he did with Boaz. Notice God might be preparing you to answer your prayer. Continue to work and grow and mature. Just as we need to listen to God, we also need to be working on ourselves, reading our Bibles, maturing. It also could be God might be preparing you to be the answer to your prayer. Don't reject the possibility. How many times have we ever said, no, God, that can't be it. God, you got to be wrong on that one. You looked at the wrong card. You're reading the wrong thing. But in reality, I can't tell that story without permission. Allison would be upset with me. Remind me, and I'll try to get permission with that. But sometimes that's what God does. What we have to do is continue to grow and continue to work and say, you know what, God, you know what, I could be the answer to that prayer. We also see this. Many times God blesses you beyond your expectations. Let me go backwards. Anybody ever done that? That you have been the answer to your own prayer? You've been praying for somebody and God's like, it's you. Anybody want to share that story? I mean, if one of those things is a shot in the dark, it might be one of those things that just comes to mind. Notice number 2. Many times God blesses you beyond your expectations. God blesses you beyond your expectations. Boaz marries Ruth. The long-anticipated love story is complete. And God's been gracious, but what about everybody else? What about Naomi? What about the family? We see what happens. Verse 3. And first we see that we need to trust the Lord to bless you. Verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth. She became his wife, and she went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And so Boaz and Ruth marry, and we have like months all put together in one verse that they get a son. Then we see this. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." So let me break that down. What did Naomi tell everybody to call her at like the beginning of the book? She said Mara, but what does that mean? Bitter. Like, just call me bitter. Because I lost lost my husband. I lost my sons. I'm just mad as all get out. I'm bitter at God. You think she's bitter after this? No. God gave back far greater than she could ever imagine. She said, look, I'm gonna bless you. You got a son now. And this grandson. And notice what it says. It was kind of interesting. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. I don't know about grandchildren yet, but I've heard good things. Grandparents, are they good?
Yes.
Do they like restore the old age? Or do they like, I know it depends on what they do, but
If you keep up with them, you restore them.
I'm about to say, keep up with them too long, might not, but I've heard good things about grandkids. A restorer of your age. And then it says, your daughter-in-law is better than you. By the way, the idea of saying 7 sons, 7 is a perfect number. And he's saying, listen, it is a blessing upon blessing. It's interesting, Ruth never speaks in this chapter, though the focus is so much on her. But there's thanksgiving, there's celebration. We see Naomi, who's a close relative to Obed. He will be famous. We see that further on and going on. A restorer and nourisher of her age. Ruth has been better than you than 7 sons. She is blessed and blessed and blessed. Then we see, let others rejoice with you. Verses 16. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. So Naomi was able to take care of this child. And then verse 17, and the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. God did a whole lot more through the little things in Naomi's life and Ruth's life than Naomi would have ever thought. God bless. Yes, you got a husband and you're going to be taken care of. Your lands are going to be good. God bless. But he said, you know what? You're going to be blessed. Your grandson is going to be the grandfather of the greatest king in all of Israel. You're going from kind of like you were outcast and you didn't hardly have anything to moving to the palace. I remember the last royal wedding. Anybody remember that? It was broadcast on like everything. It was broadcast on like the country music channel or something. It was everywhere. Do anybody remember what was going on like outside in London that day with all the people lining the streets? I remember this. It was kind of weird. Anybody remember anything weird that was going on in the streets? There were girls dressed up in wedding dresses on the streets. And they would interview them, going like, why in the world are you doing this? And what do you think they said?
He wants to be like Carl.
Said, maybe he'll change his mind. Because what happened is Kate Middleton, what happened to her that day? She was a commoner. She was going to eventually be queen. She went from normal to royalty in the course of that day. And the idea here, Naomi, Ruth, chapter 1, they are down and out. They're like, I don't know what we're going to do. Naomi's like, I got a little bit of a plan. We're going to try this. But God says, you know what? I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless you greater than what you ever can possibly know. That you might not even be able to see. But I'm going to bless you beyond measure. Here's some lessons for us. Number 1 is this. One of the easiest sins we commit is limiting the ability of God in our minds. One of the easiest sins we commit is limiting the ability of God in our minds. Think about that. How much can God do? Just in general.
Everything.
He can do everything. He's like Chuck Norris when they ask him, how many push-ups can you do? Chuck Norris says, I can do all of them. God, how much can you do? God can do it all. But how many times in our own mind do we go, oh God, yeah, you might be able to get me halfway there, but you can't get me all the way there. God, you can only get me a little ways. Or God, yeah, you can give me some relief, but you can't give me healing. God, you can kind of comfort me, but you can't give me peace. The reality of it is, one of the easiest sins we can do is limit God in our minds by saying, yeah, you can only go so far, as opposed to go to the moon and back and beyond. There is no way, if you would talk to Naomi or Ruth, saying, hey, do you think that one of your descendants, your direct descendants, is going to be ruler of Israel? Not only David, but also Solomon? They'd be like, you're crazy. But God did it. Notice this. The ability of God to bless is far greater than our minds can expect or comprehend. The ability of God to bless is far greater than our minds can expect or comprehend. If perchance I said that there was going to be a fountain of money in downtown Hillsborough, and everybody that lined up and had a bucket could get whatever money's coming down. How big a bucket are you going to bring? You bring a wheelbarrow, right? You bring a little dump truck with you, right? I better say, bring a truck, up. How often do we come to where God is pouring out a blessing and we bring like a little solo Dixie cup? We bring one of those little cups we get in the bathroom, get enough water to wash our mouth out with. The ability for God to bless is far greater than our minds can expect or comprehend. Notice also this: the blessings of God deserve company. The blessings of God deserve company. I'll tell you, one of the highlights of any Sunday morning service or Wednesday night service is when I'm up here and somebody says, hey, I've got a praise, I've got a blessing. One of the most powerful services we have in the entirety of the year is the Thanksgiving service. Because people just get to give praise to God and say, listen, this is what God did. And sometimes we reveal something that maybe we've kept back a little bit. Maybe we've hid a little bit, but then when we let it go and we let everybody know, isn't it amazing how joy-filled we can be in knowing all of those blessings? The blessings of God deserve company. When the baby was born, everybody was happy. Which basically, that's usually what happens too. Whenever a baby's born in the family, what happens? Everybody's happy. And they go cook food and go bring it over to them. It's a blessing, and it deserves company. Last thing, real quick, we'll be done. Many times, God's blessings transcend your imaginations. Many times, God's blessing transcends your imagination. I'm not going to read verses 18 through 20. It contains an abbreviated 10-person genealogy. It's very interesting. The 10 persons and the 10 names, it could, if you're looking for a little symmetry, there were 10 years all the way back in chapter 1 where the family was in Moab. In this kind of genealogy, person 7 and person 10 occupy the most important positions. Number 7 is Boaz. Number 10 is David. They are the names that are remembered. Jesse as well. Notice just a few things. First is this: through you, God may raise up a great leader. He did through the generations that were in Naomi's line, and Ruth and Boaz. But you know what? He might also do that through you, through a son, a daughter, a grandchild, through someone you lead to Christ. Think about it. No Ruth, no Boaz and Ruth. No Boaz and Ruth, no David. History would have taken a different course. But through them, God raised up a great leader. Notice also this. God did send us a great Redeemer through this. Through David, we have the lineage of Christ himself, our Redeemer, our kinsman Redeemer. Redemption is the key word in this book. Redemption is the payment of the price of sin by the sacrifice of Christ, whereby he purchased the believer out of the slave market of sin and set him free. That is Jesus Christ, related by blood, able to pay the price, able and willing to take us. Notice, Ruth was a blessing to Naomi. Ruth was a blessing to Bethlehem. Ruth was a blessing to Boaz. Ruth was a blessing to Israel. And Ruth is a blessing to the world. For through her and Boaz, we have our Redeemer. So I believe one of the big lessons that we're able to gain from the entirety of the book of Ruth is whenever we look at an individual, we have to remember this. Redemption is never an impossible mission with God. It's never an impossible mission because God can redeem anyone. If you have that thought of that one person, if you have somebody in your mind going, you know what, I just don't think God can change them. Yes, God can. Ruth is a reminder that God can redeem out of any situation. He can use you to answer a prayer. He can bless us beyond any measure. And those blessings can transcend anything we ever imagine. I'll end with this little story. Way back, some 15, 16 years ago, I had opportunity to baptize a couple of youth. And I was so happy to do it. And you know, at that time, I had no idea where those youth were going to end up. But lo and behold, I'm proud as all get out that one of those youth is now pastoring a church I used to pastor. And he was here at Vacation Bible School. It was Derek Smith, and he played the piano, and he sang to us for 45 minutes. I don't know how in the world he did that without water. But I tell you what, it was like I had no idea God was going to bless in that manner, in that shape. Ended almost on time tonight. Let's bow in a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the book of Ruth. Thank you for what its message is to us. And Lord, thank you for just showing us some amazing things through it. Lord, I pray now that you would help us to keep these lessons close within our heart, that we might give them, that we might live them, Lord, that we might bless others by them. Lord, as we leave this place, I pray that you would also watch out over us and give us safety in our journey. Please be with the choir tonight as we practice, as we sing. May our voices join together in great harmony to you. Lord, may we practice just to the very best of our abilities, that we would learn and grow in our knowledge.